Okay, so we're going to be talking about what are you drinking there? Is that water?
This is water.
Okay. I've
This is
got
different.
yeah, I've got
it,
my classic gigantic glass of whiskey. Which I mean, if anyone watches this, they probably think I'm a out of control alcoholic. I actually pretty much only drink when we do podcasts.
yeah, they're gonna think that, but some of us
Yeah,
know that.
some of us know it for sure, including myself, deep down, after you went
Yeah,
through the layers of denial.
dude, it's been a while.
Well, we've been talking. We haven't done this sort of thing in a while, but yeah, it has
Yeah,
been a while. In this form factor, it's been quite a while. So we're going to be talking about primarily Joker, which we've both seen very recently. I saw it on Sunday, and you saw it on Saturday. Is that right?
yeah, I saw it on Saturday.
Yeah, we've only seen it once, right? You've seen it once. You said you almost saw it again, but you didn't. You decided not to.
Yeah, I had the chance to go see it again yesterday, but I wanted to do other things. But in my head, I was thinking, man, I bet Luke and I are going to talk about this movie. So I kind of wish I'd gone to see it again just to solidify some of the ideas that I think that I saw in the movie, but just so I could talk about it more confidently.
Well,
But it's
I'd,
fun.
I'd kind of like to watch it after we have this conversation. I think that would be cool. It rather than
Yeah.
because the only thing that's going to happen if I watch it before we have the conversation is I'm going to maybe be more serious about watching it and look out for things. Because when I was watching it the first time, I was trying to just enjoy it as a film, and then on reflection have come up with some things. But I don't think that would make a huge difference. I mean, I'm not that observant. I'm kind of a dummy when you get right down to it.
The whiskey plays no part in that.
No, that only makes me smarter and more
Yeah.
brazen with my opinions.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I feel,
So, yep.
no, I was going to say, sometimes I feel like when I watch a movie for the first time, I'm seeing it, like all of the mechanics of it are coming through first, all the symbols and the springboards for, oh, they're talking about this myth or this psychological thing. Like for me, that's generally what comes through on the first viewing, but then on the second one, then I'll enjoy it as a movie.
See, that's interesting because I'm completely the opposite. I have to. It's so unnatural for me to do that, and maybe it's because I'm newer to the literature. I guess because until I guess a year and a half ago, I hadn't really read that much in the sort of vein that we've been in for the last year and a half, and so it doesn't come naturally to me, and so I have to sort of reflect on it and then try to find those threads. I mean, you found something that we were talking about today that we'll definitely get into that I certainly didn't consider, the biblical analogy, which is a good one, which we can get into for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Why don't we just start with overall impressions and sort of take turns? You
Yeah.
go first, and then I'll go, and then we can sort of dive into it, just so people watching this later have a sort of frame of reference about how we feel about it overall, and then we can get into whatever happens.
Yeah. I think so. At the end of the movie, I went to see it with a friend, and at the end of it, I just thought that was really good. That was a really solid movie. And I didn't, when I came out of, by contrast, when I came out of Blade Runner, I immediately wanted to see Blade Runner like right away. I wanted to walk right back in and see it. And with Joker, I don't know. It was
So slower burn.
it was. I mean, it was definitely. I felt it was moving. It was powerful. I was enthralled the entire time.
Yeah.
But I just whatever. There was something. I've been trying to figure out how to categorize it. I mean, Blade Runner just felt grand and mythical and timeless, even though
Was
it's
it the tone? Because you wouldn't want to walk back into Schindler's List 5 minutes after seeing it. You know what I mean? That's a good movie, but you wouldn't go say, "Golly, let's go back in." That was
Yeah.
that was quite a ride. That is quite a ride, but it's not the kind of ride you want to go on more than once every 10 years. You know what I mean? It's a pretty traumatizing movie.
Yeah, and that might be it. I think the thing that kept sticking out to me was how much this movie felt like what Joseph Campbell would have pulled from James Joyce when James Joyce calls the highest form of art aesthetic arrest, in the sense that you're not pushed away from it and you're not pulled towards it, but you're held in a static state
Yeah.
where you're just enthralled by it and thinking about it and ruminating over it, and all the pieces of it work together to compel thought, and not thought like what Campbell would talk about. Oh, when you see an ad for a car or a refrigerator with a hot girl beside it, he's talking about stuff from the 50s and 60s. That, oh man, I really got to have that refrigerator, or a travel poster that has some epic ski scene. Oh, now I really got to go traveling. Or the opposite.
Away in a moment.
Yeah, and if that type of art, advertisements and things like that, are trying to elicit an emotion of you want this, and then the opposite of that, that's what he calls pornographic art. And then the opposite of that,
not strictly pornographic art, but sort of the
well, he does call it pornographic, but pornographic in the sense that you lust after it, not necessarily. Yeah. It doesn't have to be sex or pornography the way that we think about it.
The kind of art that hurts your dharma.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the one that the art that pulls you towards it, as Joyce would call it, is pornographic. The art that would push you away from it is called didactic. And Campbell would interpret that as something like, you shouldn't be doing this type of art, or not necessarily a cautionary tale, maybe not, but more of like a didactic lesson from, you can find in the Bible, oh, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that. That's that's what pushes you away. Mm-hmm. That's an art that pushes you away from it. But then aesthetic arrest.
What would be an example of that sort of art?
Like
deconstructionist protest posters. I was going to say deconstructionist sculptures made of rubbish, that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. Just to show you, oh, look at the horror of this thing. Mm-hmm. So on the one side, one shows you, oh, look at the horror of this situation. The other side shows you, oh, look at the amazingness, or look at the character of it that draws you towards it.
It elicits attraction, and urgent attraction, and the other one is revulsion. Yeah.
Right. And then what Campbell talks about with Joyce's ideas, which come from the book, The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, where Joyce lays all this out. Fantastic book for this discussion, is what he calls
college, I think.
is what he calls aesthetic arrest, where you're neither pushed away nor pulled towards it in a lustful or revolting.
Sort of the magnets are on both sides, and you're right in the middle of the poles, and so you're suspended in midair. Yeah,
the two that push and pull, those are kinetic pieces of art, and then the one in the middle is called static, because you're held in awe of it and kind of reverence, and the reason why it works and does that is because it elicits this strange fantasy and reality colliding together, kind of like good mythology. That's what all those guys, Campbell was all about and Joyce was all about. And so it seems like Joker does that in so many ways. It seems to have a pretty good balance of eliciting those things in a balanced way. So you just think about it.
Right. Yeah. I think that I experienced the same sort of thing. You're sort of saying it's a middle way of enjoying art, not tingling your senses, but holding you and not letting you go, but at the same time not pushing you away. Right. So, yeah, I think I had that sense, but for me, I don't think it was necessarily different. I just didn't think about it immediately in that sense. When I was watching it, I was using Arthur, because it really is. I didn't think of it as a comic book film. I didn't think of it as, this is Joker. I can't wait until he becomes Joker. This is a man who has some serious problems, and this is a great opportunity, if they do it with empathy, to explore his context through the windows of his senses, right? The world through his eyes. And that's the value of any good piece of art, is to, no matter what kind of character it is, whether it's a terrible psychopath, whether it's a heroic soldier, is to force you to empathize, pull you in, and then force you to see the world as it is through this person's eyes. So I was kind of trying to do that, and sort of added to the experience of moving through the world as a sort of post-traumatic stress disorder person and I kind of saw the childhood trauma coming. I kind of saw that coming. So moving through the world with that sort of disability, and layered on top of that, the trash of Gotham, or New York City as it was, it was a very immersive experience for me. And I sort of just let myself imagine that I was the character in a way, because and part of it has to do with the fact that I live in New York, and so I see garbage bags. It's not as bad as it was in the 70s, but in the 70s, the subway cars were covered in graffiti, just like in the movie. Trash bags piled high like Mount Everest. It's really like that. In some sense, you can still see it that way. I saw a great meme the other day that said, "I know I've lived in New York when I see a very neatly stacked heap of trash and say, wow, that's really well organized." So I was enjoying it sort of on that very visceral level of feeling like I am this disturbed individual moving through this highly dysfunctional city and just trying to stay afloat, because that's really all he's doing. He's not malevolent from the beginning, and then trying to understand each sort of beat that happens and trying to evaluate at each beat, is that forced? Because one thing that's very important is that the Joker, this very important comic book character, is established as a credible villain. And so if you're going to do his backstory, which hasn't really been covered seriously in film as far as I know, if you're going to do his backstory, each beat has to be totally believable. And that's really what I was looking out for, all the beats. Okay, he's just moved an inch toward this character. I can buy that. The next inch, I can buy that. And they played it out really well, so that when you get to the end scene on the talk show, you already know everything, because you are that person. And you say to yourself, if I found myself there with that mental condition, having gone through these things, and it's kind of almost scary to admit to yourself, but I'd have to do the same thing, because it's so aesthetically perfect, and it makes absolute sense for him to have done that. On the other level, then, it's something I want to talk about a little bit later. I think it's a really good commentary on, and I was mentioning this yesterday, it's a really good commentary on the structure of society. This is a person who he's not neutral. Are you familiar with Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
Sort of chaotic neutral. He's a little bit chaotic
Sure.
neutral. But actually he's just neutral. And then he slowly becomes chaotic neutral, and then he becomes sort of chaotic evil over time. And it's not because he makes conscious decisions to become that way. And this is not to say that people aren't responsible for their actions, because they are. But it's also sort of like the whole network is somehow at fault, and you can't point to any single person and say, there it is, or there it is, or there it is. It's the entire economic structure. It's the entire class system. It's the entire sort of elites having everything and poor people having nothing. It's the super rats. It's the fact that there's no support for people with mental disabilities. Super rats part is great. There's the fact that there's no support for people with mental disabilities, and the programs get cut, and money goes to probably more wasteful things. It's just the fact that when these sort of, all of this whole web of circumstances come together, you have to say, yes, this individual is to blame for killing these people, but at the same time, you have to also understand that this individual, in a hypothetical different social structure with different circumstances, would have had the maybe counseling they needed to not become a psychopath serial killer, right? They would have maybe had the person there all the time to make sure they're taking their medication, and they're, maybe would have been social programs to not allow the stepfather thing to happen, or the boyfriend thing to happen. You just have to sort of imagine the parallel world where that set of circumstances here manifested differently in a different kind of sort of social landscape. Does that make sense?
Well, like you mentioned in our text, this wouldn't have happened in Sweden.
This wouldn't have happened in Sweden.
Right.
It wouldn't have happened in Sweden. That's what I kept, and the references are great. The rats, the piles of trash. They picked the perfect era and the perfect city. They picked New York City in the 1970s with the super rats and the garbage, and everybody's pissed off and everybody's grumpy. And the great thing about it is, I walked out of the cinema and it was still there. I mean, you could still see the grumpy old man going, I
was still in Arkham
for me.
or Gotham. Yeah. Well, so I wanted to mention, the conversation we're having right now is exactly the same conversation we had at the end of our True Detective discussion about Rust and Cole saying what blood is the debt we owe to society for our mutual delusions.
Yeah, there you go.
Remember?
Yeah.
And it's that one of the many great things about that series is it's even hinting at sympathy for the psychopath or the bad guy, in the sense, well, if you look at, because they go into the history of that character's upbringing. Yeah. And so the bad guy in that series, his whole family lineage and upbringing and all the awful things that were done to him are talked about. And funny enough, who shows up in this movie, right?
Yeah.
Who shows up in Joker?
Harold Childress himself, in clown form, no less.
Yeah.
Scary as hell.
Yeah.
With a gun.
Yeah. So that's cool. That was a cool cameo. And then do you remember, just a sidebar onto
they weren't putting him in there because he was in True Detective. Come on.
Well, did you recognize one of the detectives is the pastor from True Detective?
I didn't notice that. You have an unfair advantage. You've seen the series 4 times and I've seen it.
Yeah. So. Yeah, so he's in it. If anybody watching hasn't seen it, watch True Detective, and in Joker, then you'll notice a couple of cameos from people that were involved in a show that revolves around this same idea of sympathy for the psychopath.
Yeah.
In the sense that, well, how did they become that way? What happened to them? What were like you just talked about, all of the social structures around them,
the whole web of circumstances. Not
the mutual delusions.
Yeah. Well, it's not only the social circumstances, it's also his mental state. It's also his childhood. It's also his relationships or lack thereof.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's the thing that it makes a fair commentary on that. And so maybe we can talk about it later, but I really want to get into some of the reactions to it as well. Because it sort of frustrates me that it's so wrong, unbelievably wrong, and it does bother me quite a bit.
Do you want to jump into that stuff now? Because I definitely want to jump into the mythological cues. Like, so either way, I'm looking forward to both. So
I wanted to go into the mythological stuff first, so that we could have a treat for later.
Okay.
We can talk about the heavier shit now, and then have some almond M&Ms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned a very interesting parallel, and it's something that you have a sort of radar for this sort of stuff that I think that I lack, and it's the ability to sort of spot an analogy to a story or a myth, or find a thread that maybe most people wouldn't connect. You mentioned especially the story of Abraham and Hagar and Ishmael, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your discovery?
Yeah, and that really only clicked in today, because the day that I saw the movie, I'd been reading about the idea from Mircea Eliade, the idea of the quarreling or dueling brothers. And so there's the idea of these brothers that are either antagonistic or complementary. Their interaction with one another creates the world. It's a cosmogony. It creates the cosmos. And so that'll come in later. But the thing that just kind of hit me today is like, wait a minute, what about Ishmael and Isaac? And so then I looked it up just to get a refresher because I haven't read the Bible in years. And then I sent you that text of that verse. I think I kind of want to quote it correctly really quick, just because it was so pertinent to what the theme that was surprising to find in the movie. And it is, oh God, where is it? Okay, here it is. So just basically the story of Abraham and Hagar and Sarah and Isaac and Ishmael is that Abraham and his wife Sarai, they couldn't conceive, and so they were older in age, and so they couldn't conceive. And so Sarai has this idea, well, take my slave woman Hagar and create a family through her. And so then I guess Abraham and Hagar form a relationship, and then Sarai gets jealous and tells Abraham, hey, you need to dismiss Hagar because this isn't cool. And so I can't remember if she was already pregnant or not, but Abraham...
I think so.
Okay. So Abraham dismisses Hagar out into the wilderness. And
she'd already had the child. She had the child when he dismissed her.
Is it okay?
Pretty sure,
okay.
Yeah.
So he dismisses her, and one of the things that the Lord, like God, says about Ishmael, the firstborn from Abraham, is the verse says, he will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, and he will live in hostility towards all his brothers. So, so that's Abraham, Hagar, and Ishmael. Okay, so then I think Hagar and Ishmael come back to the fold, and by that time, I think Abraham and Sarai, who now becomes Sarah, her name changes to Sarah, they've had a child, Isaac. And the Lord says that all of Abraham's seed and lineage will be known through Isaac. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, even though he's not the firstborn, and traditionally in that society, the firstborn inherits everything, as the one to carry on the name and all that.
He was a bastard, though. So.
Yeah, Ishmael. Yeah. So Ishmael, he's not going to inherit everything from Abraham, but the Lord says, "I will raise up a great people through him." Mm. Okay, or a great nation.
Then he kind of curses him, though.
Well, yeah. Then
in a way, he makes a bold prediction.
Yeah, and so Hagar and Ishmael get dismissed again because Abraham is holding this feast, and Sarah sees Ishmael harassing or joking with or playing with Isaac, and she says, "You've got to send them away." So Abraham gives Hagar and Ishmael, I think, a wineskin and some food or something. They get some type of provision, and then they get cast off in the desert.
Very similar to the Stark situation with Jon Snow, right?
I haven't watched all of Game of Thrones.
Okay, so it's from the first season. Same thing happens. Bastard child. Cat Stark hates Jon Snow. Jon Snow's actually not a bastard, but she doesn't know that, so she hates him his entire life, even though she has to raise him.
Yeah. And so Hagar and Ishmael are out in the desert. The food runs out. Hagar sends Ishmael away, I think it says an arrow's shot length away from her, because she doesn't want to watch her son die. She's mortified and sad. And then an angel comes to her and says, "Don't worry about your son." I forgot what happens, how they survive, but the angel, I think, also says, God has said, I'll raise a great nation through
Maybe, do
him.
they suckle from a she-wolf? No, that's wrong.
That's
It's
later.
another one.
That's chapter 2. Uh, Meanwhile, in Rome, and so, and then it says that Ishmael becomes a great archer. So he becomes this warrior figure.
Yeah.
This power. He has his own type of power. Okay, so that's the Abrahamic story. Now, in the movie, where does that overlay? So it seems that story seems to overlay with Abraham being Thomas Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
All right, he's got this. He's got this. We know from Joker's or Arthur Fleck's research that his mom, who is, she's troubled herself, she's got mental instability and things she's dealing with herself. She was a servant at Wayne Manor at one point.
Yep.
And then she gets dismissed. And it's not 100% clear. It's a little bit ambiguous, which is pretty fantastic, why she gets dismissed. But at one point in the film, Arthur Fleck discovers, or he finds, I think, a letter. He reads one of the letters that his mom is continuously writing to Thomas Wayne. She's always talking about, he's going to save us. He cares about us. He's going to respond to our pleas for help. And so he decides to open one of these letters and reads it. And that's when he finds out that he is, in fact, the son of Thomas Wayne.
But he's, in fact, not the son of Thomas Wayne, but he thinks he
Right.
is. Doesn't matter. He thinks he is.
Yeah. So
He's under the impression. And they... you can also see it when he confronts him later on in his face that they did have they did have a sexual relationship.
Yeah. And so, comparing that part of the story, Joker finds out that his dad is Thomas Wayne,
Yeah.
who had an affair with this servant woman. That's just like Ishmael and Hagar getting, the Hagar gets dismissed with this bastard child and all this kind of stuff. And then another parallel is you look at the age of Bruce Wayne in the film. He's a kid. He's 7 or 8, maybe.
Yeah.
And if you look at the story, and so that must mean that his mom conceived when the mom was pretty, much older, like further along in her years. Like if you see her in the film, Thomas Wayne and his wife are an older couple.
Right.
So if Bruce Wayne is that young, that must mean that his mom was older when she conceived him, much like in the Abraham.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well-
in the story of Abraham, Sarah is something. I mean, she's in her 80s or 90s. I can't remember. And Abraham, he's in his 90s as well.
She's very old.
Yeah. And so that's sort of the front end of the Abrahamic story. And then in the end of it, the whole idea of Ishmael raising a great nation. Okay. So in the movie, what happens to Joker at the end? Where is he standing? He's standing on top of this police car, and there's all these people rallying around him. They're his people, they're his henchmen, his followers, and his nation.
And we know what happens next. Yeah. He becomes the king of them, the prince of the crown prince of crime.
Yeah. And I think
He's in and out of the asylum, but he becomes the crown prince of crime, and then from there becomes the iconic character. And I think people are sort of speculating on whether it's supposed to be him as the original story, and it's sort of a lineage after him of Joker characters who sort of he anoints, which is a possibility. So it wouldn't really matter, because what he did then is create the nation, and the nation needs to still have a leader. So if, for example, he's not the Joker, but maybe the progenitor of the Joker image, he's sort of the Moses of the dark side in a way, and he sort of he has his nation, right? And then he, in that moment, solidifies on the talk show, solidifies who this person is, and creates the ethos of this, let's call it a nation, right? Well, let's say then there's another Joker, and another Joker, and it becomes a generational thing. That sort of also parallels the whole nation thing, because you would have Ishmael probably passing down what he knows to some selected leader, and some selected leader. So it has the makings of a sort of stable structure of chaos, a stable structure of anarchy, in a way. And I mean, it doesn't parallel what you're saying in terms of it being sort of a dark side thing, but it's, you know, in the structure of it, created through not darkness, but created through being cast out. When you're in an innocent state, because Ishmael, when he's cast out as a baby, so he's completely innocent of then the fate that is sealed for him at that moment, right? Every moment of his life after that is a struggle. Every moment of his life after that is difficult, and he did nothing wrong other than get born, and then everything else was a disaster. So Arthur Fleck is born to a person without the financial means to support him, to someone who is despondent at times and has an abusive boyfriend who, spoiler alert, causes brain damage, which then leads to his entire life of misery and going from job to job and mental instability. Yeah. So that's the most interesting part of the parallel to me is the fact that there's a kind of tie, even though it might not be real, a kind of tie between Bruce Wayne and Joker. They might be stepbrothers is pretty interesting, but the idea of having your fate sealed at birth, you're going to have a horrible life, and it's sort of like a progression of it's going to sound like I'm saying that environment causes everything and that you can't be a good person if you were born poor and have brain damage. But that's not what I'm really saying. I'm saying it makes it possible, and that to some extent, someone born into a circumstance with those sort of events happening to them, that person isn't responsible for what they turn out to be. In the most objective sense, they're responsible legally, right? But they're not responsible in the sort of most objective sense. Causality sort of just made it happen.
Yeah, they didn't show up fully formed as a psychotic, evil,
right,
malevolent individual. There's a logical chain of circumstances that formed who they became. Just like in real life, there's a reason why somebody becomes the person they become and then does the things that they do. It's not like, surprise, this demon just showed up because they made the news. It's like, no, there's a whole history of things that happened, and which largely a lot of those things are out of their hands.
Yeah, and it makes a good case for sort of the pre-programmed universe of pure causality. Everything just unfolds, and that's all there is. Yeah. Everything is just unfolding, and there's nobody's going around thinking, all right, now I'm gonna, it seems like that, it looks like that, but ultimately it's just unfolding.
Yeah, there was a great section in, I think, the most recent Sam Harris and Joe Rogan podcast, where Sam Harris lays out a lot of that essential defense of why people become the people that they become, in just a super lucid, logical way, which actually evokes a lot of empathy. It's like, man, if I, whatever I am, my consciousness had been planted in the head of whatever that child born into that crappy situation. Yeah. Then, it's of course I would have become that. Of course this would have happened.
Right.
It's very, and so looking at that and reasoning things out, if that could be true, that there's a lot of circumstantial stuff that compels people to become who they become, then maybe we can see those circumstances and then focus on the circumstances so that people just never even become that way.
The only issue I take with Sam Harris's approach is that sometimes he doesn't lay out the separations clearly enough, and it almost sounds like he's saying, because on the most objective level there is no free will and things are just unfolding because of causality, that punishment doesn't make sense. But we exist on two levels. We exist on the sort of mundane social level where we are responsible for everything that we do, even though we might not be on some higher level not actually responsible for what we do. I mean, you would say would you say Joker shouldn't go to an insane asylum? He shouldn't be put in jail for executing someone on live television. No, you'd say, well, no, he should. But that doesn't mean that somehow there's this demon inside that's expressing itself. It's just a person who was placed on a slope that went this way rather than this way, and that's what happens when that sort of thing happens to a person. Well, maybe
Right.
those common. I'm reading a book right now called The Gene. It's the history of the discovery of the gene and its implications, and it's really interesting as well, and it's giving me a lot to think about. Sort of a side note, but it's covering a lot of stuff about what led up to the Holocaust, and that there was a lot of, it wasn't just a secret sudden thing that the Nazis were doing. They, across Germany, had first laid the groundwork for it being socially acceptable to what's the word? I'm trying
Stigmatize?
to think. No, to when you sterilize, to sterilize
Oh.
people. They made it
Oh, okay.
totally socially acceptable. In the 1920s, it was completely socially acceptable in Germany to sterilize people for defects. Sterilize for defects. Even in England and the United States, there are whole groups of people who call themselves eugenicists or sterilizing
Oh,
people.
yeah, okay.
Because there was a firm belief that your genes would determine your entire lineage. If you were defective, your children would be defective, and it's all just, everything's just playing out based on genes, which to us seems like a very simple view. In part, it's true, because genes do play a factor, and how they're expressed plays a factor, and, there are a lot of other factors that you can't predict because people with bad legs become physicists, and you can never know who's going to do what. But it's interesting how it lays out how actually the Holocaust was a gradual stepping up of something that everyone in Germany just sort of shrugged at. Yeah, sterilize them. I mean, they're defective. It's a midget. Defective. Sterilize. Like it was no big deal. And then the next thing is, well, if we're sterilizing, we might as well just do some forced abortions. Well, if we're doing forced abortions, we might as well just, euthanize. They're just kids. Well, if we're euthanizing defective kids, we might as well just start exterminating entire groups of people. And it was just a sort of gradual increase. Pretty shocking stuff. And I didn't really realize how gradual it was. It's pretty crazy. It's a good book. It's called The Gene.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wanted to ask you, sort of staying on the topic. I wanted to ask you about Thomas Wayne, because if he's sort of the crux of the chaos in a way, he sort of creates the entire situation by maybe firing Arthur Fleck's mother, maybe fathering an illegitimate child, and then having a son who might be a spoiled brat, and then dying because he's an asshole. All of those things he sort of seems to be at the center of everything. I wonder if you make anything of that with your mythological goggles on.
Yeah. So it seems like he's referred to as a savior figure by the mom. He is sort of a god figure because he lives in heaven, this gated house where everything is manicured and perfect, by contrast with the world, which is slummy and crummy.
Yeah.
The New York City Arkham, Gotham. So I don't know. It seems like we can put the god label on him and then look at how he sort of abandons his creation. So it's a very cynical view of God, like a Christian God.
It seems it seems like that would be more of a sort of creator god, sort of god, a more chaotic creator god, rather than a traditional Christian god, in the way that most people conceptualize God, right? I get the similarity, but as a sort of creator, but he does just sort of once things get moving, he sort of seems to just abandon it and focus on living in luxury. I mean, I don't think there are any redeeming qualities that he has. He doesn't seem to be a great father. Because he lets his kid play too close to the gate and get touched by creeps. and he doesn't seem to be a particularly caring person when he's confronted by someone who might be his son. He shows no empathy whatsoever. You know, he doesn't have any attributes of the stereotypical god.
Yeah, he's a little bit aloof, self-interested, and arbitrary.
Yeah.
Because remember how he reacts to the news crew that comes up, and he responds about this to the situation in the city. Is like, well, look, I'm trying to help these people, but they don't want to help themselves. You know, why are they taking it out on people that, like me, who actually tried to make something of themselves? So there was, stand up. You know, you can't approach me. I'm God. You can't come near me.
Yeah.
And
he sees himself as far above. It again reminds me of the eugenics thing, because people just saw themselves just by assumption as better genetically because of a specific type of jawline that they may have had. Oh, I have this particular jawline. That makes me superior to other people. And that's a sort of simplistic thing, but he sort of can't see that. He can't see anything other than his own lens. He can't see it through their eyes. He doesn't see them as agents, as conscious agents. He sees them as children that need to be taken care of. I mean, he sees them as super rats who need to be fed. They need a hand to feed them, not tools to pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Yeah, you cut out for a second. Was that the people that
super rats?
The people are super rats, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Thomas Wayne is the uber rat.
Yeah, he can't be bothered, kind of thing.
Well,
why would
he cares? He cares. He does care. He cares in a sort of egocentric way, and the way that you'd care if you did something great that helped others, so that people would say that you were great, so that then you could get something. He's caring so that he can be elected mayor. So he's doing good things. He might be doing some good things, but in his mind, he's not doing good things with true empathy. He's doing good things through the lens of this is going to look really good. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm going to look great after I do this.
Yeah. Have you ever?
Because of that, he misses a lot of stuff. He doesn't even understand that having garbage on the streets is not comfortable. He doesn't even understand that having social services is important. He can't even see it, because he thinks that sort of token generosity is going to solve the problems.
Yeah, and doesn't Arthur Fleck bring that up on the talk show about he will never empathize with us. He will never empathize with the outcast and everybody in a shitty situation. That just won't happen. I think that's one of the lines that comes out of his mouth about
right before,
not seeing things from our point of view.
Right, exactly.
So why would God come down from heaven and empathize with our lot, but he still thinks he should be respected and revered, but does he know what he's created, kind of thing. I don't know, but I think
Arthur is sort of an expression of the circumstances, and he's a singular manifestation of the circumstances. Just as, in a way, it's not Bruce that is the opposite. It's Thomas Wayne who's the opposite. Thomas Wayne is an individual who stands at the center of his circle of wealth and piety, and Joker then is sort of soaks in all of the dark energy from what's going on in Gotham, and in a moment embodies what it all means, and takes the only action that could be taken. Because if any other action had been taken, it wouldn't have solidified a leader, right? In order to be solidified as the leader, number one, this is something I was thinking about as before it was happening that made me realize it had to happen. Number one, if he had actually killed himself like he wanted to on the show, obviously he can't become Joker, so that obviously can't happen. So he has a gun. So if he has a gun, then something has to happen. Right. He needs to do something with that gun, otherwise they wouldn't have set that up.
Right.
If nobody is responsible for the murders on the subway that happen, then it becomes a sort of it's anarchy for a few days, and then it dies down and there's no clear leadership. But if the actual person who did it admits to it, the sort of the person who created the entire movement accidentally admits to it, and it's televised, and then removes a symbol of the thing that they're opposing. Seconds later, it's a perfect way to set himself up as the sort of embodiment of the movement, right? So the fact that he executes, what's the talk show host's name? What's his name? Murray. When he executes Murray, he seals himself as the Joker. It's the moment that he becomes the actual Joker, and it couldn't have happened any other way. That's one of the, I think, the most brilliant parts about the script, is that they made everything come together in a single moment. He makes a statement, he admits something, and then he executes a symbol and creates himself as an opposite. It's perfect. And similar, and it's interesting how it's paralleled in history. Burn down the Reichstag, point at the Jews, and become the hero of the people. Bolsheviks, I guess Lenin was like that, but I can't think of a specific moment like burning down the Reichstag that would have made it that clear. But I'm sure it was similar, and maybe the French Revolution. I guess I don't know enough about the French Revolution, but these movements against excess and against the social imbalance, they create these singular identities that can only exist. They pop up, and they can only pop up in certain circumstances. And when they do pop up, they act as a foil to the thing that this entire group opposes. And some people would say, not to get too political, but some people would say that Trump only exists as president because of a certain momentum among a certain group of people who are pissed off about a certain type of thing that have allowed the environment for that sort of figure to pop up. And I'm not necessarily comparing Trump to Hitler or the Joker, but it's that same kind of thing where it's fertile ground, and then this lone person sort of springs up and everyone goes, ah, yes, this is our leader, because he represents it in the right way. And it's hard to do that in fiction, I think. That's one of the, I think, brilliant moves in the movie. That's my favorite part about the movie, is that they were able to do it in a believable way. As I said before, every single step is logical. You're able to travel along the dark path with Joker, except for maybe when he kills his imaginary girlfriend. I didn't quite understand that part. But you're able to mostly travel along the path as him, in a sense, and then also, when that happens at the end, sort of fully appreciate that it couldn't have been any other way, and if it had been any other way, it wouldn't have been believable, and he could never have become the actual Joker. It would have been forced.
Yeah, I didn't walk away thinking that he actually killed the girl, like his love interest.
Why?
I don't know.
No, if he didn't, then they would have showed him not doing that.
They didn't really show anything.
But he came back to his apartment and started laughing in his underwear. So that tells me that he did that.
I'd have to see it again. That would be one of the things I'd want to see again. I think there was
blood on him as well. He's on the sofa and he's in his underwear and he's laughing. So I think he killed both her and her daughter. Okay, so here's how it goes. He sees her. No, he doesn't see her. He thinks about her. And the thing that he thinks about her is when she does this. Remember? She does that. Mm-hmm. And then he turns around when he met her the first time. He turns around and says, hey. And he overdoes it because he takes things too far, because he doesn't understand the nuance of interaction. He doesn't know how to talk to women, right? He doesn't get that. He shouldn't go that far with it. that he shouldn't even think that that's interesting or funny. He shouldn't even do that at all, because she already did it, and she did it for a sarcastic reason. But then, as soon as he before he does that, there's a short clip of her. She does that action.
Mm-hmm.
She does that,
Yeah.
and then he goes into her apartment. So that to me sets up this sort of somehow perverse feeling that she wants to die, and he's sort of lost all sense of balance and perspective, and he feels like the only thing he can do is kill her, even though I agree it doesn't make sense. Maybe subconsciously, because for a long time she was his girlfriend. Maybe subconsciously he's realized suddenly that she never was. And so when he realizes that she never was, then sort of it flips a switch. That I can't see it any other way, because if he didn't do that, then why would they show him going into her house? And then why would they not show the conclusion of that conflict? She steps back to the wall like this, and then the next thing you see, he's laughing on the sofa in his underwear. What else can you glean from that?
Well, so he's sitting on the sofa, and then she walks out, or you see her show up in the background, and she says, it frightens her that he's there, and she's like, sorry, sir, I think you're in the wrong apartment. He thinks he remembers her pulling the trigger next to her head in the elevator, the finger triggers. And then he slowly turns around and he mimes the same motions. And then I think it's her backing up or whatever. But then it's just him walking out of the apartment. Like, that's it.
I don't think there's a shot of him walking out of the apartment, is there? Oh, yeah, there is.
Yeah,
right,
it's him, and he's just walking down the hallway, and it's from the shoulders up. So, at the end scene, when he's talking to that psychiatrist, the very end, there's like the blood on his shoe, and oh man, he killed his social worker. But I didn't get the impression.
Why would they want to make that nebulous, though? You'd want to know that.
I mean, there's some other things they left nebulous. Was the affair between Thomas Wayne and the mom a real thing? Was it an imagined thing? I didn't feel like there was any super concrete evidence one way or the other, and I think that was intentional to leave it.
I think they wanted to leave. That was certainly left ambiguous on purpose, because they wanted to allow for the possibility that Joker and Batman are actually stepbrothers, which is very cool. It's a very cool concept. Yeah. But I don't know why you'd leave. Okay, if you're gonna show him murder his mother with a pillow and murder his colleague, and you're gonna show all of the other times that he kills, you'd have to have a reason for leaving the other one ambiguous, right?
It's the one where we don't see violence, we don't have any blood, we don't have any evidence that there was any crime actually committed, other than taking things to a logical conclusion or inferring.
Well, but then when he's in his apartment later, there are sirens encroaching, coming up to the house. So, that suggests maybe somebody found them, or,
I thought that was the same day that he was, let's see.
So he's laughing on his sofa after he walks back into his apartment. He's in his underwear, and he's laughing on his sofa, and then you hear the sirens coming. So the sirens and the whole setup just seems less ambiguous.
Yeah, but
I just took it for granted.
I think that was around the same time when he was about to go on that show or something. There was something that happened that
was I think that was the next day. The next day he was going to go on the show, and he was getting ready.
Hadn't he just killed his mom? I don't remember. I should have seen it. I should have watched it again.
The order, I'm unclear on the order thing. I thought he killed his mother after that scene. I think he went the next day. I think he went to the hospital and then was sitting by himself, and decided to kill his mother. Which hers makes perfect sense, because she's now gone from an actual mother figure who has cared for him and nurtured him to someone who's betrayed him and actually been the cause of his suffering.
Yeah.
Through her negligence, right? So
yeah.
that makes sense. And killing his colleague also makes sense. That scene is really good.
Yeah, it was. If
The
I
white
did
face,
want to.
ghost face, the whole ghost face thing.
Uh,
It's a great visually. It's a great scene.
so that's so funny that you mentioned. Oh man, that just unlocked a whole other set of ideas. There's
Well, I want to talk about Bruce Wayne a little bit too, but go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. So well, talking about kind of backtracking a little bit to the dueling brothers idea, I did want to go into that a little bit of that era. Like that theme can be found in tons of myths from all over the world. There's an Iroquois myth, Native American Iroquois myth that's similar. There's some South American myths that are similar about these sort of divine twins or divine brothers, divine siblings that from their conflict, they end up creating the world, like I mentioned earlier. One of them specifically in the Native American myth, there's a creator god and the coyote, this trickster god named Coyote, and they're sitting in a boat, and I think, I forgot the specifics of it, but this coyote figure is always messing up the plans of the creator god and throwing a wrench into the gears. So this creator god wants to create this stable, healthy civilization, but then the coyote, the trickster god, always wants to mess it up in some way by bringing sickness, plague, or some negative aspect into existence. The coyote god, he's always very irreverent, vulgar, very sexual. Not always, but in some of these different stories, he's these different things, but they're always sort of a negative, darker aspect of society. But these cultures always have that god in there. And so looking at the Joker in the same way as the trickster figure represented by Coyote, who is just insane. He's funny, but he's also insane. He's dark.
He's not funny. He's called the Joker, but he's not funny.
Yeah, okay. In the myths, he's pretty comedic. In one of them, I think it's Coyote.
I thought we were talking about Joker. Sorry.
So
you're sort of like, you're sort of going through a Loki sort of character, because Loki's the same way.
Same thing.
Thor and Loki. Loki is god of mischief, and he's always messing up people's plans just because he enjoys it. I've read an African myth that's similar to the story of Thor and Loki. It's an African one, but I can't remember the name. It's another god of mischief. And
is it the one that wears the hat with like different colors on different sides? And
it might be.
He's walking through between some fields, and one farmer on one field sees the hat and says, "Oh, it's red and green," and then the other farmer sees, "Oh, it's like blue and white."
Yes.
Just sowing discord for the sake of chaos, just like
that's a good story.
Yeah.
I don't know if Romulus and Remus count, because I don't know the characteristics of both of them. I don't know in detail, but there's also that sort of brother versus brother. Once he has aspirations, certain type of aspirations, the other brother can't survive because he knew that he would become a rival, so he had to die.
Yeah, and in the Iroquois myth,
that's more of a who are the other brothers we were talking about? Children of Joseph.
Ishmael and Isaac.
Ishmael and Isaac sort of story. Yeah, one has to take something from the other, and does so out of necessity, but it sort of looks cruel.
Yeah. Well, and just to kind of lay out that Iroquois myth a little bit, just to paint that there are many parallels to many stories and many cultures of this same idea of the quarreling brothers. The one brother that sort of gets raised as the Isaac, the accepted brother, he's always trying to create stuff, but then his rejected brother, the rejected Iroquois divine brother, he's always trying to imitate his accepted brother, but all of his creations turn out monstrous and sort of malformed. And then I think out of that, in that same story, in that same conflict, out of their battles, they also end up, their bodies end up forming the landscape around them. So it's this cosmogonic myth, a creation myth, just like the movie is an origin story, which is a creation myth, because we know from this locus of chaos, and these two warring brothers spins out the whole Batman ethos, the whole Batman world, the whole
Right.
this thing we've all grown up with. At
Truly
this point.
dark Gotham is created at that moment. We know that it's not just riots that happen on one day. We know that it's something that changes on a deep level the entire sort of structure of the city. And Gotham becomes a city known for its underbelly and its darkness.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really before, apparently in the movie at least.
Yes.
It wasn't really before.
Yeah, that's another aspect of those.
It was a rubbish-filled, rat-filled Eden.
Yeah. So, and that's another part of that myth structure, is that you did have this. You've got this dissolution or dissolving of the old world, which could have been nice in the past. Everything is, but in this case, it's sort of degrading and crumbling, and then you have this return to chaos. But then you have this new formation, this new world, this new narrative out of that.
Well, the interesting thing there then is that Thomas Wayne's mentality and his class gives rise to Joker's domain, Joker's world, Joker's universe, and Joker. Gives rise to Bruce Wayne as Batman, because it's sort of like a tit for tat in a way. You have excess here, which almost by its existence forces the underbelly to rise up and choose a figure to represent it, and then the fact that darkness spreads then forces the light to rise to create a figure out of the ashes of the previous world, because the wealth is still there, because Bruce Wayne is wealthy because his parents were wealthy, but now it's balanced. The pendulum has swung the other way, because if he were like he would have grown up like his parents if they hadn't been murdered, right? He would have been exactly like his parents. He would have been a spoiled brat. He would have been a trust fund kid, He would have bought a white convertible BMW and worn boat shoes and all of that stuff. But instead, his parents were murdered because his parents, not them, but his parents' world created the darkness. They created the darkness. It had to exist. And then the darkness, because it exists, created the space for a hero to sort of rise out of the ashes of the old world, cleansed. Yep. Because they were good, right? They were good, but they lived in excess. And when you're good but you live in excess, you're sort of crusted over, and you don't see the sort of the things that happen because you're good, you're a good person, but you don't see what you're creating by your opulent lifestyle, right? And so you have to there has to be sort of a shearing of the detritus and the crust that has built up over centuries of sort of wealth and this imbalance to sort of say, hey, it's time to start the cycle again, okay? And then we create the Joker, and then Joker creates mayhem, and then the mayhem allows the undetritus covered character of Batman to sort of rise up as a pure force for actual good, and resist the darkness single-handedly, which is interesting.
I thought Wayne was just an asshole.
No,
I didn't really.
I don't think that. No, I'm not trying to say that he himself is the cause of everything. I'm just saying that the existence of why do you think they had all of the scenes? Why do you think they had all of the scenes with the contrasts were really striking? So you have the scenes in the theater. They're watching Charlie Chaplin, and they're ho ho ho. They're all laughing. And the scenes at the mansion, the scenes of that lifestyle contrasted with how the poor are living, social services being cut, all of that. The stuff that I said before. So it's not that Thomas Wayne per se is that character, but he's sort of stands at the peak of it. He's sort of at the pinnacle because he's running for mayor and he's one of the wealthiest people in the city, right? So I'm not saying it's him. I'm saying it's his class that lifestyle that creates the other side. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
not
think
him
it
per
was.
se. I mean, he might have been Batman had he grown up in different circumstances, but he sees the world through a certain lens because he doesn't. He never had. His parents weren't murdered by criminals. You know.
I thought it was interesting that you called him a good guy, and I was curious. Like I don't know. I never got the impression that Wayne was
I see what
could
you
ever
mean.
be called a good guy.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, he's an asshole, but if you were at a cocktail party with him and he was having polite conversation with you, you would say in that world he's a good guy. He's a good guy probably according
Gotcha.
to within his world.
Yeah,
If you were
yeah.
sitting next to him at the theater, he'd say, "Hey, Thomas, ha ha ha, yeah, oh, what a good guy." You'd say that, right?
Nice boat shoes,
But then
by
when
the way.
yeah, no, I love your boat shoes. I saw your car outside. It's dope. But then when
Yeah.
he's confronted by a weirdo in a hoodie in the bathroom, then the asshole comes out. So he is an asshole, but he's good according to the distorted
Okay.
definition
yeah.
of good that's created by the opulence. Does that make sense? I just sort of picture.
Oh, yeah,
this,
totally makes sense. Yeah,
I picture Bruce Wayne covered in this sort of film and crust and fungus and just barnacles and stuff, and just because that's who he is, he's rich. He's in that class of people, and everyone else is like that, and
Yeah.
so everyone's a barnacle, and say, hey, barnacle, hey, everyone's, but they don't know what they're doing. They have no idea because they don't have the goggles to see what they're creating. But they are creating their demise. They're creating it.
Yeah.
They have no idea. And
Well,
so
like
that's the
Arthur
great,
says,
the great
he'll never
commentary.
come down here and.
Right. There you go. They're creating their demise, and that's why it's a great commentary, because I think a lot of that stuff is happening today in maybe not such an extreme way, but it's happening today. It's 100%
subtle, and
happening.
it's
I mean, why
apparent.
are there so many mass shootings? Why are there so many why is there so many people addicted to opioids? Why are there so many people killing themselves? Why do people have to sell their homes just to pay for health care for the kids? Why do drug addicts have to go to jail? All of that stuff has to do with the fabric of society and the fact that things are askew.
Yeah, the extreme binary and disconnect between such extremes, because you like Thomas Wayne, like you said, has no idea of what he's creating.
He's not malevolent.
in it.
He's a fish in a fishbowl. He just thinks everything is water around him. Everything is, you know what I mean?
There's a level of there is a level of just sheer ignorance. It's not malevolence. It's just ignorance to, I don't know the consequences of my actions.
Which I think is exactly what happens today. Again, I'm not trying to make it a political conversation, but that's exactly what it is now. The fact that, gigantic corporations don't have to pay taxes, and then there's somebody who has to sell kidneys and sell their homes just to pay for their child's leukemia treatments. I mean, there's something is wrong.
Yeah.
And I wonder what it felt like before the French Revolution, and I wonder what it felt like before the fall of Rome, and I wonder what it felt like before the Bolshevik Revolution, and I wonder what it felt like before the rise of Hitler, and I wonder if there are some parallels. And I think that Gotham and the creation of the Joker is meant to say, hey, we've got one of these happening now. Look at this. This is what we're trying to say. Do you see this? And the I got to go into this now, but it's symptomatic that many of the responses, and there are many, I think, good responses to the movie, but many of the responses to the film are the violence. Can you believe this killer? I can't believe how violent the movie is, and he's going to exacerbate the incels, and the incels are going to, start doing this sort of thing. But that's the exact opposite of what the movie is trying to say. It's trying to say, why are there incels?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Why is all of this happening? You gotta look around and notice it. It's not, if you think that this film is trying to push someone who has a violent sort of urge to be more violent, you have to be absolutely delusional, because this film is trying to say this is what allowed Hitler to become Hitler. This is the what when you don't have the right, when the entire world is slanted this way, things go this way. And when the entire world is slanted this way, things go this way. And if the world is slanted darkly, then things are going to go dark. And look at this character. He's an embodiment of the darkness. Pay attention. Find it around you. Are there people around you who are addicted to meth? Is there something that you can do to sort of begin to notice that maybe you live in a version of a dystopia, maybe not unlike Gotham? It's not that severe, but in some ways it is. And so I think the thing that frustrates me is that the reactions to it are, you're going to make somebody become a serial killer. You're going to make somebody be good, go do a mass shooting, which is it's dumb. It's not supported by any evidence that movies make people kill people. And it also is, for the reasons I just said, completely the opposite, the wrong interpretation of the movie. And I mean, you can look at, there's an awesome graphic that shows the revenue of video games over the last number of years and the number of mass shootings in countries around the world. And as violent video games are purchased, violence goes down. It's an inverse correlation. So there's no case to be made that violent media makes people more violent. There's no evidence to support it, and anybody who says it is just sort of just bleating nonsense. Bleating, not bleeding. Bleating like a sheep. It bothers me. It pisses me off. Anyway,
I thought the point you brought up about the movie shows the violence, and it shows the descent into absorbing or becoming, not wearing a mask, but becoming the mask of Joker and chaos, because it's trying to get you to empathize with what are the things that could be, like, how am I contributing to that happening around the world, even in the most subtle way, the way that I speak, my acts every day, the things that I buy, the things that I watch, the things I don't buy, the things I don't do, sins of omission and sins of commission, essentially. I was going to say, remember the scene where Arthur imagines that he's on that show with Murray, and he stands up and Murray invites him down, and Murray says, I would give up all of this if I could have a son as like you, because Arthur just went through this whole spiel about how he takes care of his mom who has these disabilities, and he loves his mom and this kind of stuff. I mean, it's like the guy is only looking for the father that he never had, which really is, this affirmation and this sense of love and belonging and identity. So it's,
I think you'd have to not watch it to not empathize with the character in certain ways. I mean, he's at the beginning a completely sympathetic character. You can sympathize with his desire to have a father that he never had. You can empathize with his reasons for going to Wayne Manor and trying to see his dad, talk to his father. You can empathize with all of those things. And then if you're going along that road and you're following him through the journey, then you surprise yourself with what you in a hypothetical universe might be capable of under similar circumstances, which is, again, one of the important parts of the film, that it's meant to show you, there's the Milgram experiment. And the Milgram experiment is where they brought people into a lab and they had them electroshock people. And they just did it because they were told to do it. And the experimenter said, nope, you must do it. Don't give up. You have to continue. And they did. Okay. Why did you continue? Because he said I had to. Yeah. Right. We're sort of, most of us are willing to sort of sell our, how should I say it?
switch off.
What am I trying to say? We're trying to sell ourselves out. No, that's not what I want to say. We're trying to glide through life without ruffling feathers.
Oh, without conflict.
And so we're capable of becoming Nazis as a result.
Sure, yeah.
Because we're willing to electroshock people, we are the Germans who were students 6 months ago who are executing Jews, in a sense. And if you don't acknowledge that that's part of the human psyche, and that under the right circumstances, that's you, then you're not incorporating your shadow, and you're hiding from it.
Yeah,
There's another thing. There's another part of that. So we've recently been reading Jung's autobiography, and he talks about Nietzsche's decline into madness, and Nietzsche sort of succumbed to the dark aspect of himself, which Jung calls personality 1 and personality 2. Jung believes, and probably has, and maybe someone like Jordan Peterson, who talks about that sort of thing a lot, they have to sort of come to grips with the fact that you are the Nazi in a potential universe. Luckily, you're not born that way. You are the person electroshocking that stranger in the room in the Milgram experiment. You are that. Why? Because you haven't come to grips with exactly what you believe and the fact that you're capable of darkness. If you come to grips with the fact that you're capable of darkness, and you look at the darkness within yourself and you absorb it into your personality, then you're able to, in a sense, control it. It's like a magical power. You are aware of it in yourself, and so when you find yourself in a situation where everybody's zapping people with electricity because people tell them to, you can say, well, I don't have to do that because I understand that you're just an authority figure. I could just say no. And that's what it means to sort of absorb your shadow, or at least
incorporate the shadow.
Come to grips with your own darkness, which we're all capable of.
Yeah, and also, the whole. I'm glad you said shadow. The movie, in some sense,
do you get an erection when I use Jungian terms?
I'd say what?
I said, do you get an erection when I use Jungian terms?
Yeah, I almost dumped the table over.
Why is the computer moving?
Yeah, bump. Because that idea is something that we're taught. It's more. It seems like we're compelled more to ignore that side of the consequences of our actions, because that compels us to be good consumers. When we ignore the damage we can do when we, kind of maybe a cheap example, but the Nike factory stuff. How do we have all these cheap Nike shoes from back in the 1990s? These shoes cost so little, but then we learned what we were doing. There's slave labor wherever, and people revolted against it. But the only way we were able to continue in that blind consuming direction was to ignore the shadow, ignore the negative side of it. So much like in the movie, if we repress and ignore and don't come to grips with the consequences of our actions, then the consequences of our actions will rise up against whatever is, ignoring them, and balance things out. So Joker, like you were talking about earlier, he is the natural bloom and fruit of suppressing that shadow, that subconscious
society-wide shadow.
Yeah. And that only comes about because you've got that extreme comes about because the other extreme exists. It's like they necessarily have to exist to balance each other out in some way, and maybe one can be denied for.
Yeah,
absolutely,
it must happen.
Kind of like a sound wave, a sine wave.
It's etched in the fabric of the universe somehow.
Yeah,
it is, and and again, that's why Batman exists, because then the pendulum swings. It must swing. It has to continue swinging.
Yeah, and I think
Thomas Wayne, Joker, Bruce Wayne.
Yeah. Penguin, Robin, Two-Face.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And so,
Penguin versus Jesus. 2.
Yeah. So anyway, that was, I'm glad I was waiting to say it, and then you said the shadow thing.
Sorry.
So that was, no, that's cool.
Go ahead.
2, did you have another big thing to bring up? Because there were two kind of minor.
I said nothing big whatsoever, so no.
Okay.
God bless you, sir.
Excuse me. Thank you.
What's going on?
Joker bless
coming
me.
down with bronchitis?
Yeah, no. I think it's just I'm dehydrated, maybe. But the two things, there were a couple of
Drink
things I
some
wanted
alcohol.
Yeah, soon enough. I don't want to deplete it before this is over.
Lord knows.
Well, yeah, you've almost done it. You've made progress. So the love interest, the woman.
Oh yeah, his imaginary friend.
Yeah, she is the Jungian idea of the anima.
Oh yeah.
I just wanted to bring it up in case somebody listens and hasn't heard about that idea yet. So Jung had this idea about the anima and the animus, and for like just breaking it down into a binary pair for clarity and contrast, a man, when he sees a woman that he is in love with, he projects his anima, his idea of the perfect mate, the perfect woman, onto that female.
Yeah.
And that projection is a compensatory or compensating ideal for whatever his deficiencies are. So say he's a
what about people who are
has a
attracted
libido-
to toasters and things like that? The people who are attracted to inanimate objects.
all
Are they
bets are off.
projecting their inner toaster?
Yeah.
Appliance.
Yeah.
It's all right. I'm
so
sorry.
yeah, no. I think to break it down, it's just a compensatory or
Yeah.
compensating ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, I'd be curious how Jung would handle like homosexual relationships with that. Well, okay, Jung, how do you deal with
Well, why do
a guy who's attracted to a guy or a woman who's
traditional
attracted
homosexual relationships often result in a sort of more feminine, more masculine type? They don't have to. You could just have two bros who are gay, but that doesn't happen as often as more masculine and more feminine. So maybe it's maybe it's a psychological component and not a specifically gender thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's got less to do with your dangus and more to do with your subconscious.
Yeah, and also these Jungian ideas are from almost 100 years ago. So we would probably update the way we talk about it now.
Yeah.
So anyway, the idea of the anima, Arthur Fleck's anima is the woman that he meets on the elevator. She's perfect. She does everything right. She is a total
She's
compensation
a smoking hot single mom.
Yeah, and she laughs at his jokes, which are dark, and she offers up the humor. He says, or she comes to his door and says, were you following me the other day? And he's like, yeah. And she doesn't freak out. She rolls with it.
She doesn't really do that.
Right. And we find out later that
he only
that's
actually
perfect.
saw her once.
Well, you see her, right. He only,
the only real encounter is on the elevator. Everything else after that is fictional in his mind.
yeah, it's a projection of his subconscious, of his ideal. What would this female I only met once, man, she's great. What would she be like in other circumstances too?
I think it's really interesting when they're at the hospital. It seems so mundane when they're at the hospital with his mother, and she says, "I'm going to go get some coffee." He says, "Yeah, you want one? Yeah, I have one too." That's what normal people do at the hospital, right? And so
Yeah.
what he's projecting there is what he really wants is to be a normal guy, but he has no idea how to achieve that. It's a summit that's beyond the cloud cover. You know what I mean? He can't even see it. Because
Yeah.
the thing that's obscured by the low clouds involve dealing with women. When he sees the two guys throwing French fries at the woman on the subway, he doesn't say, "Hey, stop that." He doesn't even want to do that. He's just watching it like, okay, we have to figure out how relationships work. And he has no idea what's going on.
Well, it does bug
deeply.
him because he
No,
starts
I don't
laughing.
think it does. I don't think it does bug him. I don't think his laughter is the only thing, because, well, I think he doesn't
When
only.
he's
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure if it bugs him for that reason though.
Well, so for example, let me give you this reasoning behind it. So when he's on the bus he's playing with the kid, making faces, having, just joking around, making him laugh, and the woman reprimands him that he's become awkward. He doesn't know how to deal with it, and it freaks him out. It's like a neuroses. When you come up against something you don't know how to deal with, you react in this strange way. So his neurosis is the laughter. So that's the
Right.
expression of,
Right.
oh, I have a neurosis. So
Yeah.
he laughs. And so it's not necessarily a good or a bad. It's just he doesn't know how to deal with it. And so then on
Right.
the tram or whatever, when the three guys get on there and start harassing the woman, he just doesn't know how to deal with it. It's not. It bugs him.
It doesn't upset him. He just doesn't know what to do. Yeah.
Like when Errol Childress comes in and makes the joke about the short guy, then Arthur Fleck starts laughing again because he just doesn't. It just bugs him. He doesn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And actually, I think Jung calls that an antiodromia, which is running in the other direction. So when you have this personality, we all have this personality type that's strong for dealing with specific circumstances, and it's been matured. But then when we come into contact with a circumstance that we don't know how to deal with, we revert to childlike
Yeah.
actions because we never had to grow it, we never had to mature it, so it's still stayed in that childlike state.
Right. He's an entire person in stasis or arrested development. His entire being is in stasis.
Yeah, and in the stasis that he was brought up to be in. He tells that story about, my mother said I'm here to bring joy and laughter. So he's still in, oh, that's my point, that's my purpose. I never have to grow out of that persona. So there's so many things that have never matured for him.
And I think one of the scenes that suggests everything else perfectly. I think if there was one scene that shows it perfectly, it's when he's at the comedy club taking notes, and he has no idea when to laugh. He doesn't find anything funny. He just laughs at certain things, but he doesn't know. He has no idea what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, he's
blind to it. He's looking up at a mountaintop, and it's completely obscured by clouds. There's nothing is observable to him. He can't see any of it. And then when he kills for the first time, something happens where he finds that instead of him looking out at the entire world and feeling completely mystified by it, the social interactions, people are looking at him going, "Oh shit, this guy's gonna shoot me." And so the frame of reference changes. In his entire life, he's been looking out at everything, just utterly confused by social interactions and almost everything that's going on. And now suddenly, for this one action that he takes, people are going, "Oh, that guy is about to shoot me in the face." You know what I mean?
I do exist.
Yeah, I do exist. Exactly.
I have a power. I do exist.
Right, exactly. And so that's what you have to reckon with if you watch the movie. You have to reckon with that fact. And I think that it's kind of missed by a lot of criticism that I've seen, unfortunately, but it's, I think, a pretty powerful point and I wonder how many people actually feel that way in real life.
Yeah, totally. And to what degree? I mean, I'm sure in some cases, maybe we all can relate to feeling powerless. Sure. I mean, everybody can relate to that at least a little bit. And then some people relate to it to the level where they want to do some violence about it because they feel so powerless. So there's like a scale of how much, we relate.
Let's talk about incels for a second. I'm fascinated by that whole movement.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a connection to Joker mentality and incel mentality?
from what I've read about the incel stuff, the big takeaway would be the disconnection from society, the disconnection from feeling incorporated and maybe belittled. So, I mean, I think Joker has those themes in it for sure. Ostracization and not fitting in, not knowing how to fit in, and nobody's trying to help you fit in. So, it gets kind of like not taking care. So in the 1980s, when the budget cuts happened and they had to dump a bunch of mentally ill patients out on the streets because there was no money to take care of it, there was nobody left to reach out to them to sort of, like minister to them essentially, or care for them, relate to them, and provide them a connection point as much as possible with the rest of society. And so when that is lost, when there's nobody to reach out to somebody to incorporate them back into society, then how would you feel?
Yeah. It is interesting how, I mean, you can see it cropping up. My little brother is a youth minister, and he was telling me about how troubled everyone seems. And he said, it seems odd to me that when I was a kid, being a kid was just being a kid. Being, 14 was just being a doofus who likes to play Assassin's Creed, And it seems like now when I'm, as a youth minister, talking with people, there are borderline suicide, all of them. It seems like, not all of them, but many of them it's a different landscape mentally for a younger generation, and opioid crisis and all of that stuff. There are some dark things happening right now, I think, and that's why the commentary. So before I saw the movie, I saw a statement made about the director. What's his name?
Todd Phillips.
He said, "Why'd you stop making comedies?" He said something like, "These days, making comedies doesn't make sense," or something like that. These days, making comedies doesn't even make sense. You can only make this type of movie now if you're actually making art. If that makes sense. It's almost like he was put into the position. He had to do that. Is the only thing he could do is change genres because the world changed. It shifted on its axis somehow, and he had to start making a different type of film because he made The Hangover.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and
it's a different world. Hangover is in a different world than we are living in today.
Yeah, and who better? I mean, who has a better pulse on society than the tricksters, the jokesters, the people that know that see
stand-up comedians.
Right. Yeah, to see the absurdity of so many different facets and just the chaos that's bubbling up. I mean, that's sort of been a trope, a characterization of comedians for a while, I suppose.
Henry VIII, yeah.
Henry VIII?
Or, I mean, what? What's the Shakespeare play?
With a joke with Trickster?
No, the Shakespeare play about the king. King
Lear?
King Lear. Duh, Henry VIII. What am I thinking? King Lear. Duh. Yeah. Well, King Lear's foil is the fool. The entire play is the same sort of character. He's the person who makes all of the observations about what's wrong. He's the only one who can, and he says it right to the king's face. He says, "This is a problem, and you're an idiot," and he says all of these things directly to his face. But he can do it because he's doing it in humor.
Yeah,
the king puts up with it. King, what did I say Henry VIII for? I'm an idiot. Well, I'm an idiot. There's nothing I can do. It's too late. I'm off my meds.
Yeah. I was going to say, by contrast, I heard that Matt Stone and Trey Parker stopped making South Park because they said, everything we make fun of, it's not a joke anymore. It's all real. So that was, I think, what South Park ended after 20 some odd years of seasons. And somebody told me that the reason they said they stopped was because if we can't, we used to joke about these things that we thought would never happen, but now they're happening. So it's just not funny anymore.
My brother and I have this sort of mythology between us where I might have told you this, but we walked into we saw this supermarket called Western Beef, and we thought that's a really weird name for a supermarket. And we went in, and we bought some tea, and the tea was in a giant box of 164 packets called Western Beef Tea, because it's the brand of the tea. It's a store brand tea. And we said, this can't be real. How can this exist in our universe? Why is there a store called Western Beef? They don't even really sell that much beef. It's just a regular supermarket. And what is this Western Beef Tea? And then we went into this room, and the entire section of the supermarket was a freezer section, rather than having a section where there were freezers covering over the food, which is what's normal in my universe, my home universe. There's this entire section of the store that's a gigantic freezer section. We thought, this seems like we've just stepped into some sort of strange middle place of some kind. And we walked out, and then we got the news that the day that we walked out, we got the news that, I think it was the news that Hillary Clinton had beaten Bernie Sanders in one of the primary races, which we had been supporting the opposite outcome. And we decided on that day that we had gone into Western Beef is a sort of this in the center plane. And we walked from regular New York in a universe where we come from, walked into Western Beef and out into a sort of dark universe. Yeah. And everything now, we both sort of have this running joke where we now exist in a place where there are these supermarkets called Western Beef, and they're everywhere, and Donald Trump is president. We're in sort of this dark place, this dark universe, the underside.
That's a great segue to... If you don't mind me going back to some of the symbolism in Joker, the idea of translating from one state to another, or from one universe to another, or a transition of states. So there's 3 times that we see the staircase that Arthur Fleck uses to get
that very,
home.
very long, tall staircase.
Right. So staircases are used throughout mythology in religious stories to symbolize transition of state, from moving from one plane to another. Also climbing a ladder, climbing a rope, descending a ladder, descending a rope.
Jacob.
And
Jacob and the angel?
Yeah. Jacob's ladder. Yeah, he sees the angels going up and down. So
gets a bruised hip, right?
Yeah, he put some balm on it later, and it was fine. In shamanic traditions, according to like Mircea Eliade, the shaman will ascend a tree, like rungs on a ladder, or will ascend a tree to go commune with the gods, and then come back and having received new powers to be a shaman, or new information to use to talk with people and to minister to them and to help them out, or to maybe afflict a competing shaman with diseases. Weed. Yeah, give them wacky tobacco and some of that devil grass. So anyway, the first 2 times we see Arthur Fleck and the staircase, he's going up. Okay, but he's not really, at the times we see it, he's not really ascending to a better place. He's actually on his descent towards becoming the Joker. So he ascends it once. I think the first time we see it, he goes up the staircase, and then we see him immediately after walking down the hill to go to his apartment to go, live with his mom and all that stuff. I can't remember what the second time is when we see it.
I don't remember the second time. I remember 2 times. Ascending and looking tired, and descending as Joker. I only remember 2.
Yeah, I thought there was another one, but maybe not. But the times we see him ascending, things are getting worse. Then when we finally see him descending, he has become the Joker. He has this newfound power. He's made the transition from his lowly impotent state of Arthur Fleck to the powerful Joker figure. And so he's got his he's been torn apart by the demons in his own mind, and he's been reassembled as the Joker. And speaking of that, the other thing I was going to mention is the painting of the face white. So in a lot of these traditions, when you're going through an initiation ceremony, sometimes they'll paint their faces white because they become a ghost. They're dead, and they go out into the wilderness for this initiation ceremony. And then when they come back after having gone through the trials of initiation, they have a new identity. So Joker painting his face white is sort of it seems like that's a valid symbol of the initiate. They're calling out to that initiation motif, and his old persona dying and this new persona taking full form with new powers and new mentality.
Very interesting. So the staircase thing, I realized the symbolism there. Not the first time, but the second time. He's descending the staircase. He's descending into madness. He's reaching the sort of the depths of who he could have potentially been. Now he's become that character. But I didn't think
it's like an inversion.
Yeah, it's an inversion. Yeah, exactly. I didn't think about the white face character though. That's kind of cool. That scene is kind of pivotal as well, because that scene shows him for the first time as still able to make rational decisions and able to use his agency to affect people's emotions. So when the midget is exiting, he gives him a little scare. He knows that he's killed this person, and that's scary. He knows that that's scary. He's somehow maybe more aware of how it feels to be the other person. He knows that, if I were in a room with a guy who had just killed another person with scissors, I would be scared. The only way that you can go whoa like that is to know that the other person feels scared, right? And so he's able to sort of empathize with his fear and use it to sort of give him a small fright and then let him out. That scene is really, I think, a pivotal scene in the film, because it shows him because the Joker is the Prince of Crime. So the Prince of Crime can't just be a raving madman who's just nuts and can't do anything. The Prince of Crime has to be scheming, coming up with plans. He has to be intelligent. He has to be a person who can manipulate people, use people, and understand how they feel. And so that scene kind of sets him up as someone who's not just this guy who sits in the nightclub and doesn't know when to laugh. That scene sets him up as this new persona has enabled him with a new characteristic, which he didn't have before. And the new characteristic is the ability to, in a sort of perverse way, empathize with how people might feel, and in the future, potentially manipulate them, which is then displayed later on when he comes out onto Murray's show and spins and is very cordial and shaking hands. He seems so graceful and perfect compared to his previous persona. He's spot on and then flips it around. Yeah. And you can then see that, okay, now this person, now that he's fully embraced his shadow and rejected the other side of himself, that he's able to, in a sense, have perverse empathy, which is going to allow him to become the crown prince of crime, which is very interesting, I think. That is his new superpower.
And talking about that scene where he lets his, like, the short coworker out.
You said short coworker.
Instead of...
He's a midget.
He says to him before he lets him out, he's like, no, you can go. I'm not gonna hurt you. And then the guy can't reach the lock to get out. He can't undo it. And so he gets up and he undoes it and he opens the door, but then he shuts it before his coworker walks out, and he says, I wanted you to know you're the only one that was ever nice to me. So there's that. Yeah. He recognizes when people are nice to him. Smooch. And he empathizes with the person who gets made fun of a lot, because the other guy, Errol Childress, he gave the dwarf, the midget, the short guy so much shit for being short.
Constantly mocking him, yeah.
Yeah.
He's just a regular New Yorker. He just gotta, this guy's just going with the flow. Doesn't understand himself. Just keeps moving along. Pissed off, but doesn't know why.
Carrying guns.
Carrying guns, giving them to people. Gotta
Giving
defend
them
yourself.
Giving them out like candy.
Like candy. Here, take a revolver. Use it on the subway. That was Boston. I slipped into Boston there for a second. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a great scene. I loved it because it's almost because you realize how much knowledge and wisdom almost the bad guy has, how much they have to be a good villain, to be a good foil, to be a believable bad guy. They've got to have that capacity to empathize, that level of humanity. Otherwise, it's just aberrant. It's strange. We don't know how to deal with it.
Right, and then they can't become influential in a criminal space either, because you have to be able to manipulate people. Right? He can't just become a hero of the mob and then disappear into an asylum. He has to come out conniving, manipulating. He has to understand exactly who he is in order to become this iconic character. And that's where I think there are similarities with the Heath Ledger's Joker character, because Heath Ledger's character says, I wouldn't know what to do with one if I caught one. I just do things. And he just does things, but he does things with a fundamental understanding of how human beings think. As a sociopath, though, or a psychopath, rather, he understands exactly how people feel, and then he twists it around and uses it to his advantage. And that is there are the makings of it in this Joker. So there is a sort of segue to Heath Ledger's Joker, and I think that they were sort of, in a way, tapping into some similar territory, even though they didn't talk to each other, and I don't think Joaquin Phoenix talked to Heath Ledger about it or even carefully studied his Joker character.
Yeah, and it's the one central icon that links those two portrayals together is the idea of the coyote figure from Native American myth, in the sense that character is always trying to mock or upset the plans of order and structure. It's almost like it's not even to necessarily. It's always just to throw a wrench into the gears. It's not. I don't know if I haven't read enough of those stories to know if it's malevolent, if it's evil, like I'm trying to destroy this other thing, or if it's more
like an Ashton Kutcher sort of thing,
just trying to complicate things. Yeah, complicate your idea of the ideal or how easy things should be. It's like, no, things aren't that easy. Things can't be that easy.
I have a strain of that in myself, for sure.
Do you?
No, absolutely, 100%. Not to that degree, but I can't tolerate people who take every interaction that they have at face value, or people who have no understanding of sarcasm. When I'm just interacting with people, I can't even help it. I have to say something that's just off the wall or strange, or something that they're not expecting me to say. I'm just watching them to see what they're going to do. Oh, how are you going to deal with this thing I just threw at you? Because I have to know who I'm talking to. And when you have a conversation where you're just going through the motions and you say what you're supposed to say, and you say, how was your weekend, and all of that stuff, and everything that you say is by them taken at face value, and you're taking everything that they say at face value, then you're basically you are perfect material for the Milgram experiment. And I see sort of, I can't help it. My way of having conversation is to create confusion sometimes, and to make people think, why did he say that? Well, to either confuse people and make them go away, or to say, I understand what he's doing, and to be my friend. You know what I mean? I want to sort of, I want to divine it as quickly as possible by the way that I try to speak with people in normal conversations, because I don't want to spend any time, and I'm not saying that I'm in any sort of way any character. I'm not trying to ascribe myself a characteristic, just the people I like to be around. I can't stand being around people who are 100% genuine about everything, every interaction. Everything's real, everything's serious, and everything is. I care about everything, and everything is something that I wonder about. How's your life going, and all of that stuff. I just can't stand it, and I hate it because it's being literal about everything, and existing on that level is not where the world is, because the world is a couple of layers down. So at least in our conversation, let's go like 2 layers down instead of 10.
Yeah.
But let's go a couple more down. We don't have to be up here where Hallmark movies are. Let's go a little further. And if you're the type who likes Hallmark movies or watches them on a regular basis, we probably can't be friends.
Or the type that would not understand the point of the Joker movie and then write about it.
Yeah, okay, so let's go to the tweets. Thank you. Wonderful segue. Hell of a segue.
Let's go to the tweets.
All right, so I'm going to be putting them up on screen. They'll be up on screen.
Oh, wow. All right.
And they're just rapid screenshots, but I'll read them out, and then we can sort of react, okay? So whatever comes to mind. And let's just bash this person to smithereens. Okay, so there's this person who seems to be upset about the movie, and there's some tweets that are sort of an instant reaction to it that I want to go through. Okay, first one. Can you be an environmentalist and still enjoy Joker? Yes, but as bell hooks tell us, we can enjoy films and remain critical. Let's continue. Arthur fixates on Sophie to humanize the character. The interactions are examples of gender violence, but not presented this way. So the second part, Arthur fixates on Sophie to humanize the character. So does he fixate on her to humanize him? So I think what she's saying there, right, is that the reason that they introduced her as a character in his imagination is to make him seem more human so that we'll sympathize with him.
Yeah, because none of the rest of the movie tried to humanize him at all, period.
Right, exactly. The interactions are examples of gender violence, but not presented this way. I don't get that last thing. The interactions are examples of gender violence, but not presented this way. Arthur fixates on Sophie to humanize him. Okay, that who
wouldn't? If you're that far ostracized or removed from humanity, when somebody's nice to you at all, then I mean, yeah, who wouldn't glom on? Or
there's something,
that's one aspect.
I was saying humanize him to the audience. But there's something that's a lot more disturbing about that comment, is that he shouldn't be humanized. The suggestion is that we shouldn't be humanizing him because he's a monster, and we should be shocked by his behavior. I can't believe he killed someone with scissors. No, he's humanized from the beginning. He is a human. Yeah. Everyone should be humanized, and we need to understand the entire spectrum of human psychology in order to understand ourselves. And if we say no, I can't. I mean, who doesn't love watching?
That's a monster. That's a demon.
Why is that TV show about, what's that TV show called about serial killers? Mindhunter. Why is Mindhunter so popular? Yeah. Because we want to understand the psychology of psychopaths. It doesn't make us murderers. It makes us understand elements of human psychology. And this comment is saying basically we shouldn't try to empathize with bad people.
Yeah. I mean, if I was talking to the person who made the comment, it would be interesting to, maybe in another conversation, they realize this is, there's that level and that great aspect of this movie that is trying to humanize that person. I mean, maybe they've said that in the past 3 or 4 days, but it does seem, you showed me that tweet and it did seem to dismiss humanizing, somebody with,
as though it's not a good thing to humanize someone.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Have you ever seen Downfall?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
So when you see Downfall, you think to yourself, God, this guy had this dream, and I don't know, all of these circumstances led to this absurd dream, and it's all crashing in these last few days.
Are you want to explain to
Hitler.
people what it is?
It's a film about Hitler and his last
At
few days
the last
in the bunker,
3 days.
the last few days of his life. And if you were to say we shouldn't try to understand Hitler, we shouldn't try to know why Hitler did what Hitler did. Well, I mean, I was talking about the eugenics thing earlier. Much of Germany was condoning eugenics in general, but we should try to say, I can't hear this sort of thing because trying to humanize this sort of character is wrong, and it might perpetuate it. But no, it's this that perpetuates it, because when you don't know about it, then how can you defend yourself against it? When you don't embrace the shadow, then how can you know what the shadow is when it consumes you? You are just a pawn of the darkness, basically. And you're the person who says eugenics? That seems popular. I don't know. Instead of someone who's really aware of what's going on and thinking and rational and understands that there's darkness in everybody. To understand Hitler is, I think, one of the most essential things there is, and that's why people want to know about serial killers and are fascinated by serial killers. We shouldn't say, oh, you're fascinated by serial killers? What's wrong with you? No, we should say, oh, you're fascinated by serial killers. That's good, because then you can try to understand them, and that probably helps you understand more about everybody. I mean, that's a valuable perspective.
Yeah, and also, instead of reacting to that personality in such a way to perpetuate the things you don't want, maybe you'll be conscious of why they're that way and react in such a way that instead of pushing them towards taking the gun to school, it instead takes them the other direction where they don't go that way. I mean, how many things about human psychology and about ourselves can we learn and then understand, oh my God, I didn't know that my words or my actions were compelling people down this road, but if I did it reacted this way instead, it would go down the other road, which is a road that I would want to go down as well. It starts to create a society that I would want to live in, so that the bottom isn't so crummy, and people aren't in these crummy situations and becoming, and then doing all these awful things.
Well, let's distill it to its essence. The essence of all of this is you have a vote, and you can vote for politicians. So who are you going to vote for? That is to distill this entire thing to its most practical essence. So the decisions that you make are based on your experiences in life and what you decide to learn. And if you just sort of go with the flow and you don't think about things because you're afraid to know about human nature, you might be the person who votes someone in who might do more harm than good. And the fact is that people who are leaders and presidents, they have tremendous power, and they can enact policies, and they can make militaries do things, and you're the one who decided to vote for that person. So at a basic level, a political reality and a social reality, the person who the person who is not educated on these sorts of things is the person who potentially could make a chaotic decision. And if there are 100,000 such chaotic decisions, a chaotic person may become enabled to do chaotic things. And that's exactly what happened in Germany in 1939. 39, 37, 39, 38? When did the...
It was in the Weimar Republic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the 30s. I don't know the dates.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you.
Well, I mean, you see my point? It's sort of like the vote that you have is a single clear proof that this is a real thing. This is not just in your mind and your daily behavior. This is actually an important thing that you try to learn about the world, and you try to become a thoughtful person, and you embrace the fact that there is darkness in everyone, and that we're all capable of things we don't think we're capable of. And that is sort of boiled down to the fact that we vote for who we vote.
Sure.
For. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, to me, it's I was gonna say that's definitely a huge one thing, and then also in just daily life, not once every 4 years or
right, buying potato salad instead of coleslaw.
Yeah.
I mean,
kimchi instead of sauerkraut, or vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. What do you buy? Do you buy potato salad or do you buy coleslaw? I
buy kimchi.
Everything bagels or raisin bagels?
That's a tough one. Yeah, I've bought more everything bagels than
cream cheese or
raisin.
butter.
Ooh, man, probably cream cheese more so than butter.
Christ, guys, do you hear that? A cream cheese everything bagel.
Jesus Christ.
Cream Jesus Christ. I don't know what to say. All right, let's just look at another one of these tweets. We're not going to look at all of them. I have a lot, but oh no, that's not the one I want to look at.
Right now, it's just like you're intensely staring at my face.
Joker's rise as anti-hero is celebrated as revolutionary in film. It isn't. Lower-class white men view equality movements as encouraging on their social status. Joker simply relegitimates white male anger as a political tool, which it always has been. Thoughts on that? The white thing? So, okay, my question would be, and I understand why this is a controversial thing, because there's, the concept of white privilege and the white male thing being, you have white men have such privilege and opportunity, and yet, you bitch about everything. You have no right to complain about anything. The first issue is that generalizing to an entire group is always a dangerous tactic. So, what about the white man who does have mental issues? Okay, he's been traumatized. That doesn't his white maleness doesn't negate him as a person who has experienced childhood trauma and been beaten as a child and experienced brain damage. Right? He's a white male, but he's also a white male who has been traumatized and experienced. Now he has a mental disorder, an emotional disorder. If it's a black man who has a mental disorder, then that's the story. And if it's an Asian man, then that's the story. There's no racial component to it. This is not a racial story. If the Joker were an Asian character and an Asian actor were playing it, then it would be the same story. And if it were a black person, it would be the same story. I don't see the race part here doesn't quite make sense to me, and it seems to be lumpifying the issue of somehow all white males have an inherent advantage when Arthur Fleck doesn't, and also Arthur Fleck is the Joker, and the Joker is a white guy, and some superheroes are black, and this is irrelevant to the conversation, I think.
I think the focus of the movie is trying to, again, it is a fiction, and it's a lot of mythological fiction, which is intended to be more timeless. So he's more just supposed to be more, you project yourself, no matter who you are,
right,
onto this character. You empathize no matter who you are, no matter what you look like, no matter where you come from. And the intent is to tell a more timeless cautionary story, a more timeless cautionary tale. And I think, as far as what it misses or what it hits, it seems like the intent of the movie is to tell that narrative of it could be anyone that is like, how the point is to, I'm not in that situation, you're not in that situation, the same as Arthur Fleck, but I can relate to him.
Right.
I don't have the same things going on,
and
but I can relate.
And if the Joker were a black character in the comic books who became a black character in the TV series who became a black character in the movies who became a black Arthur Fleck, it wouldn't change anything. It's not a race movie. It's a movie about identifying something that you can empathize with and traveling through that with that person. It's just the fact that historically Joker has been a white character is kind of an irrelevant point, I think.
Yeah. And the and that sort of timeless global idea of relating to that character is the main thrust.
Well, that's what you do when you watch when you read anything or you watch anything. You try to find empathy with the main character, whoever it is.
Yeah.
But when you allow a sort of ideology of, well, I don't know what kind of ideology it is, but when you allow an ideology to cancel that, then you only see things that exist on the surface. You know, if you see a movie about a character and the story is good, regardless of race, because it's about what happens to the characters, you become, in a sense, that character, and you move through that story with their eyes as the windows onto that particular world. That's what stories are. But when you block that receptor and you say, well, it's somehow racial or ethnic or something, then the entire meaning of it goes away, and it is only on the surface, which is, to me, more racist than anything. It seems to be the most racist way to describe it. You know what I mean?
Campbell had one of the things that he talked about, and I think I may have been talking with you about it earlier in another podcast we did together, but it was the idea of, I think it was pity and terror, and there's two types of things. The example he used was, I think about Martin Luther King, where you talk about, like, one sentence would go, isn't it a pity that this man was shot with a gun or assassinated? And you could take any murder into account. And man, I wish I could remember what it was, but so in that case, you identify with that specific circumstance in time. But then the other more profound idea of empathy is, isn't it a pity that the situations that are conducive to that happening, period, in the first place, like, that's even more, that connects more humans together than sort of a temporal specific, not to negate the tragic, loss of life or the tragedy that happens. It's not that. It's like, let's not forget this grander scheme of why are the conditions for that happening there in the first place.
I think that's what a good contribution of the Joker film is, because is that it's trying to. I don't know if everyone did. I didn't see the comments that often, but to me that was the most poignant part of the film, is that it made me think about, with all of the imagery and the super rats and the subway and the graffiti, it made me think, why are things ever like this? Or why are why do things even become close to this? Why are things around me like this? And it's made me pause and reflect and think about, well, is there anything I can do? Is there anything that I can say, or is there any contribution that I can make to the web of positive momentum to counter whatever that is, the chaos? I think the super rats are the perfect embodiment of that. I love the super rats. They're funny.
I almost found that quote.
Are you searching? You Googling?
I am, if you don't mind. It's so cool. It'd be so cool to be able to quote it, because it's such a useful series of words.
A useful series of words. I've heard that before. A useful series of words.
Let's see.
I'm going to read one more of these tweets, okay? I'm just going to read one more. Just
Sure.
because I want to. Arthur kills white affluent dude bros, an obnoxious white male talk show host, and mean white male colleague. This inspires a revolution in Gotham, where men in clown masks riot. Men is in all caps. The film pitches the social commentary when, in fact, it's just white male aggravated entitlement.
Okay, I found it. Yes.
You weren't even listening to what I said.
It was about the dude bros.
The dude bros. He kills a bunch of white guys. They're men, and the film pitches this as social commentary when, in fact, it's just white male aggravated entitlement. But, I mean, is it entitlement to be any person who lives in Appalachia and is addicted to amphetamines? I mean, why is the opioid epidemic happening, and why is the suicide rate higher than it's been in a long time? Why would be the only question. Why?
So to answer that question, maybe this will help. So I'm going to read a quote. Campbell quotes Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. And here's a quote. Pity is the feeling which arrests the mind in the presence of whatever is grave and constant in human sufferings and unites it with the human sufferer. Terror is the feeling which arrests the mind in the presence of whatsoever is grave and constant in human sufferings and unites it with the secret cause. So it seems like the last two tweets you read focus on it's pity. We feel pity for the human sufferer, the specific circumstance in time, but then terror is what unites us with, like, why is this even happening in the first place?
Right.
It's grave and constant throughout all of humanity. It doesn't this type of shitty circumstance.
It's structural. It's architecture.
Yeah, and it's just, everybody that's born is going to die. It's just a grave and constant thing we all have to deal with it, and it's sort of looking at the world that way releases us from not only being bound to the specific, like putting a Band-Aid on the problem, but treating what caused the injury in the first place. If you, man, what would be a good example? Like if you're treating somebody that got caught in a burning house for their fire wounds, well, it's like, why don't we treat the reason why the house was on fire in the first place?
Yeah.
It's kind of something like that. I can't articulate it right now.
Right.
But
the house is still burning down. Let's do that first, and then
yeah.
treat the
Why
wounds.
don't we stop
Right.
building houses out of flammable material? Or
Right. What are the underlying causes? But then, the opposite criticism of that is, oh, well, it's too abstract for any one person to say I can do something about that. It's too broad and structural for someone to say, well, let me take action. Well, what action are you going to take when something is so broad and so structural? But
Yeah.
it's the attitude that develops toward every sort of interaction, just daily existence, that can make the change. As I've mentioned, the fact that eugenics was popular in Germany, it's not anymore. So things change, and the zeitgeist moves forward. And the reason the zeitgeist moves forward is because there are factors that influence people, and those things happen on an individual level. And there are trendsetters who push things forward, and there are people who lag behind. We've talked about that before. But the sort of being part of the moving zeitgeist is being an individual in this very broad and sort of large landscape that seems somehow immovable, but it is moving forward, and it's always moving forward because eugenics is not popular anymore. And there's a reason for that. And so you kind of have to recognize that you are part of this fabric, and that your way of looking at the world is somehow having some kind of resonance or impact on the slow motion of the zeitgeist forward.
Yeah, and the movie, it seems like it's trying to unite us with this global secret cause of why we're all in this situation anyway, where instead of being if we devote all of our attention to a singular circumstance of violence, then we lose sight of all the reasons why the violence is there in the first place.
Yeah.
And so one is more, we don't get crippled by the acute tragedy of this one single instance and lose all of our energy there.
We don't shut down because of the acute. Yeah.
With
the
that
chronic that gives us terror.
Right. Yeah. And so being able to at least hold that dichotomy, or that two, like, they're both real, like both of those things are real and heavy, but being able to hold both of them without losing sight of the other is, what hopefully can change things. Move things in a direction where we would rather go, rather than being crippled by the surprise of a specific and tragic
this one thing has happened, and then you just shut down. Seems to be the tweets I mentioned kind of seem like more in that vein.
Yeah, it seems like, and also, that's something I wanted to bring up to you as well. Did you notice that when the guys are killed on the subway, so we see what happens. We see the circumstances, like the true character of these guys. And they're drunk. So who knows what they're like when they're sober. But not that would negate their actions by any means. But it's, we see what they're like. Their kind of true natures are coming out. Nobody's there to temper how they act towards the woman or towards the Joker. And so then he shoots him on the subway. And then remember how Murray talks about them on the show and how the media frames their actions. They're all of a sudden just young men. They're not spoken, like, we don't, we get to see their true character, how they actually acted and what they did in the subway. But in the newspaper clippings, those things don't seem to have been mentioned. It's just there, young men, and Thomas Wayne says that these are
three assholes throwing French fries. They didn't mention that.
Yeah, because then people might be like, well, they got what they deserved.
Yeah.
They, that might run through their head after knowing the true character of these people, and how much now, or how much that's a fictional world, but how much in the real world is that same dynamic taking place, where the true character of these people isn't mentioned when they suffer a tragedy, when they're
and we make an immediate judgment on that basis because we only have that limited information.
Yeah, it's like there's a secret knowledge or a lack of knowledge of the full scope of the circumstances.
Maybe when we're all plugged in and we all become Borg, then we'll see everything and we'll say, "Oh, those are just 3 creeps, so they deserved it." Yeah. I am Borg. You know the Borg?
Yep. Resistance is futile.
Hey, it's true. Well, you can resist, and sometimes it works. If you're Picard, resistance is not futile. If you're Picard, then you can resist, and you'll probably succeed.
Yeah, he's doing okay.
I'm a big fan of Star Trek. Anyway,
and now for something completely different.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've covered all of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. We have talked about, and I think that we have given the film a pretty fair, not a review, but an analysis. I'm certainly gonna go back and watch it again and see what I think, and then if any other thoughts come up, then we can have a discussion about that offline.
And an addendum.
I was riding home on my bicycle from the office, and I very nearly hit a gigantic rat who was in the middle of the street, just like looking around. He wasn't even eating anything. He was just in the middle of the street, just just looking around. And I almost hit him, and he looked at me. He looked at me right in the eye, and then he just sort of slowly lumbered, like like I own this place. Sort of lumbered away. Almost
what are you looking at?
Annoyed by the fact that I was in the middle of the road trying to go somewhere.
Hey, I'm walking here.
Hey, come on. Honestly, it's the reason I like living in New York, because there is this sort of... I feel when I'm in a very, very nice place that's pristine and very well taken care of, it's distant from the grime and the grit and the way things really are. And somehow being in New York is being close to nature. It seems very counterintuitive to say that. Oh, what do you mean? The urban sprawl and the concrete jungle and the rats and all of that is far from nature, but in a sense, it's closer to the psychological nature of living things, and
it's closer to the consequences of no nature. Maybe,
yeah. It's somehow very visceral, and I like living here because you can still see it on the walls, even though it's not like it was in the 90s. Not that I wish it was like that. I don't. I like that it's safe. I like that it's a nice place to be, but I also like that there are these glimpses of, grumpy people and people honking at each other, and the grime in the subway and the rats and the pizza rat and all that stuff is something. There's something very satisfying about that to me. I like to be in it.
Have you seen Dark Days?
No.
It's I don't know if it still exists, but it's a documentary. I don't know if the reality of the documentary still exists, but it was about this subterranean community that existed in the subways in New York. And it's like a town underneath the city.
I've heard about them, the rat people, yeah.
Is that what it is? They're called rat people?
I've heard about them, yeah.
Okay.
The rat people. I don't know much about them. Sounds like I need to go exploring.
Sounds like, I don't know, maybe they have it on that streaming service I mentioned to you.
Maybe I can become their new leader. I'm from the surface.
Behold.
I'm here to bring you news. The crime rate has dropped. We need to get it back up to where it was back in the 90s.
Yeah, things are going askew, guys. We got to change it. Anyway.
Get off your asses. It's time to do some crimes. All right. Well, is there anything else you wanted to mention? I think we covered most of everything.
I don't know. Maybe the mental illness thing being passed on generation to generation. Just that I thought that was a pretty important theme in the movie, just sort of what we pass down to each other. It's not like everything shows up in a vacuum as all of a sudden, oh, now everything's shit or now everything's great. It's kind of, no, we pass these things down generation to generation, whether it be mental illness or wealth and all that stuff.
Yeah.